just announcing they will not bring charges against former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe for allegedly lying to investigators. This move likely to anger President Trump and potentially escalate ongoing tensions with Attorney General Bill Barr. Trump has publicly urged that action be taken against McCabe, who was acting head of the FBI after the president fired James Comey. Joining me now, NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, what more can you tell us about this?
Well, essentially, this case has been going on for now almost 2 years because there was a criminal referral from the Inspector General as part of the Inspector General's investigation into parts of the whole Russia investigation. And what the Inspector General said at the time when this report came out in April of 2018 is that Andy McCabe, quote, lacked candor, including under oath, on multiple occasions. This all tied to an inquiry into an unauthorized disclosure of information to a newspaper reporter regarding a Clinton Foundation investigation. So this goes back, the origins, the true origins, this go all the way back to 2016, Chris.
Was this always kind of viewed as not a strong case? I mean, is there a big surprise about how this has all come to be?
It was not necessarily a huge surprise that Andy McCabe would be demoted, which he was by current FBI Director Chris Wray. It was a little bit of a surprise that he was fired, particularly in the way that it happened 26 hours before his retirement was set to take effect. But folks understood it, given what he said. Again, there's been a lot of controversy about that, and of course, certainly whether or not the president's influence drove the firing of Andy McCabe. But I think most people, including people inside the FBI that worked with Andy McCabe and maybe were not his biggest fans, that were aware of what he did within the FBI, most of them felt that a criminal case here would have been highly unusual and something that was probably not warranted at all. So I think that's kind of the distinction. Yes, on the demotion, maybe on the firing, but a criminal case, likely not, is kind of the overall consensus from people inside the FBI.
And knowing how the president feels about Andy McCabe, that certainly isn't any secret to anybody. Even if you don't look at the tweets or the comments, you can talk about the 26-hour before he retires firing. Does he have any authority to go above this decision?
Well, the president asserted on Twitter this morning that he does have the ability to direct the Justice Department and the Attorney General. I don't think here, given the letter that was filed in this case, and the letter is very specific, Chris. I mean, they say, we write to inform you that after careful consideration, the government has decided not to pursue criminal charges against your client. I don't know what the president can do because it's signed by the chief of the Fraud and Public Corruption section for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia. So for the Justice Department to go back on this is just something that I can't see at all happening here. On top of that, the president doesn't have the ability to file criminal charges. That has to be done by a United States attorney, or actually most commonly a assistant United States attorney, somebody who's actually working the case, the line prosecutor, so to speak, the type of people that resigned in the Roger Stone case this week. So I don't see a scenario here where the president can somehow reverse this. This really is the final determination for Andy McCabe.
All right, you're going to stay with us. I also want to bring in Politico White House reporter Nancy Cook, New York Times White House correspondent Annie Carney, and former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. Glenn, I'll pose the same question. Trump, we know how he feels about Andy McCabe, but basically, is there anything at all you see that he could do about this?
You know, in a rational world, no, Chris, there's nothing the President of the United States could do about career prosecutors deciding how to handle themselves in a case. But what have we just seen? We saw 4 career prosecutors file a very well thought out sentencing recommendation in Roger Stone's case, followed by an angry presidential tweet of disagreement, and then Bill Barr intervening to do something that no one thought a president would have the power to do, which is cut that sentence recommendation off at the pass and suggest that, you know, you really need to go easy on Roger Stone, the president's friend and associate. So, yes, in an ordinary world, I agree. There's nothing the president could do to intervene to reverse the Andy McCabe decision. But let's see what tweet the president sends out next.
Yeah, I guess, Annie, that brings us to you, which is what kind of response we might expect from this president. Look, even before this happened, this breaking news happened, with the Roger Stone case, it was kind of part of a bigger picture here of a president who clearly was very angry about what he feels are not getting investigations of people he feels has wronged him, or not getting some sort of retribution against people he feels has wronged him for perceived injustices against not just him, but his family. So what are you looking for next from the president on Andrew McCabe?
That's absolutely right. He's post-impeachment, where he feels he was wrongly put on trial. He has been eager to see his political enemies be brought to justice. Andrew McCabe has been long on the top of his list of people that he thinks deserves to be prosecuted. And this decision, we haven't seen him react yet, but it's just a matter of time, comes on the heels of Bill Barr trying to distance himself from the president in an interview yesterday where he said, "I can't do my job with the tweets."
Yeah, let me stop you right there, because I want to play that, and I think obviously it's all intertwined when we're talking about where the president is right now. So let me play those comments to remind folks from Bill Barr.
Public statements and tweets made about the department, about our people in the department, our men and women here, about cases pending in the department, and about judges before whom we have cases, make it impossible for me to do my job. And I'm not going to be bullied or influenced by anybody. And I said at the time, whether it's Congress, newspaper, editorial boards, or the president.
And of course, Annie, in response, the president tweeted earlier that he has the right to ask Barr to get involved in criminal cases. He has the right to get involved in Barr's criminal cases. Right. So the president's still claiming, look, he wasn't involved in the Stone case, but he will get involved in any case he wants.
Right. I mean, the president made it clear he wasn't listening to Barr about stopping to tweet about the Justice Department. But Barr's interview yesterday with ABC left two possibilities. Some people, some skeptics thought he just was looking for cover and he wanted to send a message to Trump. You know, I got this. I don't need you to tweet publicly. I got you. I'm interviewing on the behalf of Roger Stone and basically carrying out your wishes. Don't tweet about it so publicly. Or B, was he really looking for independence, DOJ independence from the White House? And today's move with Andy McCabe seems to make that interview look different, that he was possibly, he knew this was coming today, and then he really was seeking independence from the White House to conduct the Justice Department more like it's been conducted under previous administrations.
Yeah, Nancy, I mean, I think on one hand you had the president's press secretary, right, putting out a statement saying, look, the president wasn't bothered by the comments, that Barr has the right, like any other American citizen, to publicly offer his opinions. And then the president feels compelled to say, yeah, but just to be clear, you can say what you want. I can do what I want.
Yeah, the president usually, I think, makes things very clear about how he feels in his tweets or in his comments to reporters when he's talking to us in the Oval Office or at different events. And I think that he's made it very clear that he thinks post-impeachment that he has the right to fire people who he thinks are against him or disloyal to him, that he has the right to interfere in things. And I've been told that the president has said multiple times to senior aides in meetings over the last several weeks that he's really looking towards that Durham report. He wants to know why that hasn't come out faster. So I think that this will be the next chapter in this whole post-impeachment story, what happens with that report and how quickly we see it, because that is really what the president is focused on privately.
What's your sense? When might we see it?
I don't know. I think the president, I've been told that he just has really brought it up several times with senior aides. And so I'm just hearing about it from the White House's perspective, not DOJ's perspective. But it's something that he really wants. And he also wants to see people punished for crimes that he thinks they committed. And so I'm sure that this McCabe news will really bother him. And we might hear about it today when he travels to Florida later today, or over the weekend when he has a little bit more downtime.
Or even there's this little thing called Twitter, and he's been known to take to it fairly quickly once he sees what's going on. So, Glenn, tell me what you're going to be watching for over the next 24 hours.
So, you know, Chris, as I watched Bill Barr give that interview to ABC News, there was one thing that really caught my attention, and I'm going to try to quote it verbatim. Bill Barr said, "I'm pleased to say the president has never asked me to do anything in a criminal case." Now, that brought to mind two things. First of all, Michael Cohen's testimony that the president never had to ask me what he wanted me to do. I knew what he wanted me to do. And I'm not sure how gullible Bill Barr thinks the American people are, but when, you know, his prosecutors file a sentencing memo and the president lashes out by tweet saying, I don't like it, it's a miscarriage of justice, and Barr immediately reacts and responds by withdrawing it and asking for a much more lenient sentence. Are we comforted by Bill Barr's statement that the president never asked me to do anything in a criminal case? We see what's going on in front of our own eyes. So I still have trouble taking Bill Barr at his word. And let me conclude by saying I think the announcement of Andy McCabe not being prosecuted is also pretty transparent. They're using it as a PR piece because the information that we had months ago was that the Andy McCabe grand jury was refusing to indict him. And there was a letter from Andy McCabe's lawyers to that effect. So this has been something that they probably could have announced months ago, but it looks like it was conveniently timed for PR purposes today.
So we understand that Andrew McCabe has just given an interview, and we have a little piece of that, him talking about what has happened. Let's all of us listen to it for the first time right now.
It's exceedingly rare. I'm not aware of a similar situation in my 21 years in the FBI. This was a very simple situation. It was a very simple set of facts, uncontested facts. The IG makes criminal referrals to the Department of Justice based on their investigations many times a year. And in almost all of those cases, those referrals are declined, oftentimes before the ink is even dry on the IG's report. And for some reason, this one dragged on, despite the simplicity, the small number of witnesses involved, dragged on for almost 2 years. And against the backdrop of how we have seen the politicization of investigations, I just think that's incredibly concerning, and it should be concerning to all Americans.
Do you believe this was done on the president's order?
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
So, Glenn, is he right at least about the first part of that, which is that he'd never seen anything like this, heard of anything like this, an investigation that he says is fairly simple going on as long as it did?
You know, he actually has a foundation to offer that opinion as a former FBI agent and the former acting director of the FBI. He has seen similar things go on over and over again. Here's what I'll say, though, Chris. When the Inspector General issues a report with highly critical findings, as he did with respect to Andrew McCabe's candor in certain circumstances, I have no problem as a former career prosecutor and as a law and order guy having the authorities look into that, having a U.S. Attorney's Office give that a really hard look, investigate it in the grand jury, call witnesses, and make a determination whether the evidence supports a criminal charge or not. Did Andy McCabe get extra scrutiny because the president perceived him as an enemy? Boy, it sure looks like he did. But we also do want law enforcement to do its job, to look into things that come to their attention by way of an IG report or otherwise, to make sure that we do right and we follow sort of the rules and regulations, and we're by the book regardless of whether there's a D or an R or an I next to your name, or none of those things next to your name.
And so, as if this isn't complicated enough, as if we don't have enough going on that involves the president and in particular DOJ and William Barr, the New York Times has just broken a story that we have gotten confirmed. Carol Lee has gotten confirmed. I'm just going to read it to you, and then, Tom, I'll come to you and get your thoughts on this. Bill Barr has assigned an outside prosecutor to scrutinize the criminal case against President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, according to people familiar with the matter. The review is highly unusual and could trigger more accusations of political interference by top Justice Department officials into the work of career prosecutors. Tom?
Chris, I think in knowing Carol's excellent work on this, I think that it's a story that it is confusing to me why they are taking a look at this. Michael Flynn has not been sentenced. There may be particular concerns with respect to Michael Flynn's representation. I think his current counsel has raised some interesting questions about his past counsel, but there's been a number of theories that have been floated about Michael Flynn Flynn's, what he was aware of, what he was told, what his attorneys were told with respect to the interview that happened with him and two FBI agents, one being Peter Strzok, excuse me, and the interview that was the interview where he lied. And remember, he pleaded guilty to lying. And he said that he did it. And he said he had no reservations about that guilty plea. So it's very unusual in a case where there is a guilty plea and it involves the direct behavior of the person that's charged. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly is being reviewed here, particularly because the government asserts that any sort of notes, and apparently there were parts of, there were notes that were placed in the 302 and notes by the agents that were involved in this that said that they thought that that in fact Michael Flynn did display candor in his interview with him. They did not initially state that he was lying. All that information, according to federal prosecutors, was turned over to Flynn's defense team. So it wasn't as if he was unaware of this prior to entering his guilty plea. His attorneys have raised all sorts of allegations of prosecutorial misconduct, allegations of the government strongly, or at least the prosecutors involved in this case strongly deny. It's just odd to me where you have a guilty plea, you have a sentencing coming up, that now they're taking a second look at this in frankly, a very cut and dry example. What did he say on a phone call? Then what did he tell the FBI that he said? So I really don't understand this at its high level, but I need to understand a little bit more about what's going on before even offering a more detailed thought.
Well, we appreciate your background on this story and your expertise on it. Thank you so much. Tom Winter, Glenn Kirshner, Nancy Cook, Annie Carney, on a day with a lot of breaking news all surrounding DOJ. Thanks to all of you. Today, presidential campaigns are expressing concern about how the Nevada caucuses will be run, fearing another debacle like Iowa. To quiet that concern, Nevada officials released a revamped strategy overnight for next Saturday's big caucus day, after already abandoning an app similar to what turned Iowa into a fiasco. But does that mean they're ready? Keep in mind, early voting begins tomorrow in Nevada, a state that provides the first test of a diverse electorate. And joining me now is Nevada Democratic Party Chairman William McCurdy. Good to see you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
So you're going to use paper ballots, but what else are you doing to make sure that these caucus results are seen as legit?
So from the very beginning, the Nevada State Democratic Party has been focused on making sure that this is the most accessible, expansive, and transparent caucus yet. And for the first time ever, we have an historic early vote, which goes from February 15th through the 18th. But what we've done is made sure that we provide a simple, secure, and efficient process, starting with a paper ballot during the early vote, and also our caucus calculator.
So simple, secure, efficient, those are the kinds of words, frankly, that we heard from the head of the Iowa Democratic Party, and we know what happened there. Here's what campaigns are saying. Campaigns are saying that they're asking questions, and like in Iowa, they're not getting the detailed kind of answers that they would like. So what would you say beyond the simple, secure, efficient that might put their minds at ease?
So the caucus process is going to be actually very simple, similar to what many caucus goers have experienced in the past. But what we're doing and what we have done is made sure that we have trained and recruited more than 3,000 volunteers who are energized and ready to show up and receive these caucus goers. And
but my understanding, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my understanding is that that training for those people, volunteers who are running these caucuses, was using the app that now has basically been thrown out.
So when we realized what was happening in Iowa, we immediately put our heads down. We got to work to make sure that caucus goers who would, participate this time could be met with a very simple process. And our caucus calculator, which I will go back to, is going to be very simple. Actually, it's not going to be very complicated at all. And what's going to happen when they show up on caucus day is they're going to receive the information from their precinct chair, and the only person who is utilizing the caucus calculator is the precinct chair.
But have those precinct chairs who were trained on the app that now is not being used been trained on this new system?
what we're doing day in and day out, we're having trainings daily for folks who are going to be utilizing it, and we will be ready come caucus day, and we are really excited for this opportunity.
Do you have any numbers for me, Mr. McCurdy? How many of them have been trained so far, and how many have still to go in the next week?
What I can tell you is that we are doing trainings daily, day in and day out. Our precinct chairs and volunteers are going to be prepared and ready to receive all the individuals who are going to show up on caucus day. And again, the process is not going to be complicated at all. And in fact, it is really, really simple with what they're going to be doing. And you can rest assured that we will be ready like we have always been. This is the best party in the entire country, ran by the best staff, and this is not new to us. We've been leading the way with the party. We've done a lot of work, and you can rest assured again that the Nevada State Democratic Party will continue to lead the way, and we will be ready.
William McCurdy, thank you so much for your time, sir. We appreciate it. Good luck. I will see you maybe in Nevada. Thank you. Joining me now, anchor and executive producer of NPR's Latino USA, Maria Hinojosa, national correspondent for New York Magazine, Gabe DiBenedetti, and Democratic strategist and former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party, Basil Smikle. So, Basil,
yes.
If you were running one of these campaigns and you heard what you just heard from the Nevada Democratic chair, would your concerns be allayed?
So, by the way, these are all former colleagues of mine, so I understand the pressures that they're going through right now. And I've been there.
I don't even know if you can, because you never had a post-Iowa.
I didn't.
He's under tremendous pressure.
And we don't have caucuses here in New York.
Yep.
So yes, there's a tremendous amount of pressure. Look, if I were a candidate right now, I would be nervous regardless. I would be absolutely nervous, because this is one of those things that you just cannot get wrong. And there's so much weighing on the outcome for any particular candidate, because we have such this front-loaded system. And so, no, I would be incredibly nervous, and it has nothing to do with what he said and the answers that he gave. It's that these are very complicated processes. Historically, they're generally viewed as undemocratic, small d democratic. So, yeah, I would still be nervous, and I would probably add a layer of support from my campaign to what the party's already doing, which in and of itself is going to cost money and resources, which it's still going to be a pain for these folks.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, Gabe, these early states always winnow, right? And we're in a very different situation because of what happened, the uncertainty that we're seeing right now, the mess that was Iowa. And these campaigns are basically saying, look, answer some basic questions about security here. Are they trained? How are they trained? How can we be sure that the millions of dollars and the thousands of hours, both paid and volunteer, are going to actually result in a legit process?
Well, you're right, and there are a number of different concerns that each one of these campaigns is dealing with right now. You know, it is true that the Nevada State Democratic Party is notoriously among the best run in the country. They always say that, but it's also true that, you know, what just happened in Iowa paints every single thing. But every single one of these campaigns has an almost bigger concern, which is actually winning the Nevada caucuses. So that's what they're spending all of their time and resources on right now. It's really hard for them to be able to balance these two things, especially when the Nevada caucuses this year are going to be so important, because they're going to be the first time that we have a much more diverse electorate. And there are a lot of candidates who are saying, you know, we should put aside what happened in Iowa and New Hampshire, because this is going to be the first time that we're looking at an electorate that really represents the rest of the country more. That's why you have someone like Joe Biden saying, well, there's still an opportunity for me here. So there are all these different things that they're balancing. It's hard for them to then at the same time go back and say, well, let's just make sure this is secure, by the way.
Well, but they're doing it nevertheless. Yes. I mean, that's why they pay people from that part of their campaign, without a doubt. But Maria, the most important point, I think, is that anybody who didn't finish in the top two was saying about the first two, as they often do, this is not representative of the Democratic Party. But Nevada is, what, 30% Latino. And in terms of actual voting age, I think it's 1 out of every 5 voters, about almost 20% of voters of the electorate are Latino. So what is this potentially, assuming it all goes smoothly, and it has mostly gone smoothly in the past, to their credit, they've done a good job in Nevada, what's it going to tell us about the race going forward?
Well, look, one of the things that the chairman said that I was like, he kept on saying, it's so simple. I was just in Nevada. And one of the things that we heard from people on the ground is that they're going to tell you that it's so simple, but it's actually, the Nevada caucus is a little bit more complicated. I think we ended up going to the Bellagio, and that's where they're going to have a caucus meeting for the workers right there at the Bellagio. But there was a sense that it's not so simple. In terms of the turnout, look, everybody is looking to Latinos and Latinas in the state of Nevada. And this is a part of the demographic in the state that's actually been engaged, not just for the last 4 years or for the last 8, but actually for the last 30. I was talking to some people on the ground. They've been really educating Latinos to go finish high school, finish college, and actually getting like a generation prepped for political engagement. And the people on the ground see their political engagement in Nevada as very transactional. There's kind of like, we understand our power, for example, in the culinary workers. You're going to tell us your power, and we're going to make a decision here, which is why it's interesting that the culinary workers have not endorsed anyone.
Well,
big loss for Joe Biden, right? It could have been his, I think, it could have been his to take. And did he not say enough about immigration? Did he not kind of come out and just say, look, on the issue of immigration, I'm sorry about what I did. Might that have helped him? But this was his to lose.
Yeah, I mean, what happened there? I mean, talk about diversity. I think the Culinary Workers Union has workers from 178 countries who speak 40 different languages. It's hard to get much more diverse than that. Biden, obviously, long history of relationships with the unions, but he didn't get the endorsement.
Yeah, and this union in particular has been very open for a long time about its opposition to Medicare for All, which of course is the thing that has turned it specifically against Bernie Sanders in the last few days. They've made this clear for a long time, but in the last few days they've started to organize specifically on this, and Elizabeth Warren to a much lesser degree. But with Biden, you know, there had been signals for quite some time that they were considering very seriously endorsing Biden or backing him in a maybe not formal way like they did with Hillary Clinton in 2016, when they didn't technically endorse but were free to support her. I don't want to go down too much about what happened there, but it's a reflection of the fact that they see Biden in a significantly weakened standing now compared to where he was at the beginning of this race, that they decided not to endorse him. And it's hard to read this as anything other than, in some ways, a little bit of a rebuke of his candidacy. Now, he was the only candidate who was mentioned yesterday at the press conference in which they said, we're not going to endorse anyone.
It's a little awkward, actually.
Yeah, they said,
love him, but we're not going to endorse him.
Right. So there was still a little bit of a signal sent there, but it's a lot less of a signal than he'd like.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we always like to talk about debates, especially when they're on this network, but I do think, given the nature of the campaign right now and how unsettled it is, this debate is looming very large, not the least of which because we probably will have on the stage somebody who's not even on the ballot in Nevada, and that is Mike Bloomberg, and he's not going to be on the ballot in South Carolina either. He's been in a bit of a war of words, both on Twitter and in person with Donald Trump, and I just want to play a couple of quick examples of that.
Somebody said, you know, that he's taller than me, calls me Little Mike, and the answer is, Donald, where I come from, we measure your height from your neck up. I am not afraid of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is ahead of us, afraid of us, and that's why he keeps tweeting all the time. If he doesn't mention you, you got a big problem.
I wonder if, Basil, this is the best possible thing for Mike Bloomberg right now. The more the president doesn't like you, the more the Democratic electorate does.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like watching two peers, the billionaires or millionaires, whatever the case is, going at each other. Yet, Mike Bloomberg deciding he wants to spend absolutely all of his money to go after Donald Trump. There's something TV show-ish about that, you know, and I think that's part of the attraction here. Look, there are a lot of people around this country that haven't met Mike Bloomberg, but they know him through his ads. And the truth is that money buys a lot of airtime, and it buys a lot of interaction, at least through the media, with the particular voters. So the more that he does this, the more voters sort of get amped up to see what he can do at the end of all of this.
I mean, and I don't think a lot of us are seeing these ads, but in the states where he's flooding those ads, he is going after Trump frontally. So that's something that separates him from the other candidates.
Yeah, so basically the not-so-subliminal message, I'm not afraid of you, right?
Right, exactly.
Maria, thank you. Gabe, obviously, always Dr. Basil Smikle. We appreciate it. We're following some breaking news. A U.S. official confirming that the framework for a deal has been reached with the Taliban that could lead to American troops being withdrawn from Afghanistan. Joining me now, NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel, who is in Munich, and he's been covering the Taliban for at least 15 years now. So bringing all that experience to bear, what do we know about where this framework actually is and how significant it could be?
So this is America's longest war, and U.S. troops are still in Afghanistan, still fighting. 6 Americans have been killed in Afghanistan in 2020. So this is still a hot war, and there have long been on-again, off-again attempts to reach some sort of peace deal with the Taliban. And we understand now, I've been speaking to very well-placed sources with direct knowledge of events, and they said that there is a framework of a deal that is taking shape. It is not signed yet. It is not done. It is a gradual step-by-step process, but the outline of what those steps would be is starting to become clear. And the steps would be as follows. In the next several days, potentially, the Taliban would have to, they're not calling it a ceasefire, but they're calling it a reduction of violence, that the Taliban would have to demonstrate their willingness and their capacity to reduce violence significantly. If they do that and can reduce the level of their attacks and their violence against Afghan security forces, against American forces, against civilians, and if they can sustain that reduction for about a week, then the United States would enter into some sort of agreement, a more formalized agreement with the Taliban. There would be some sort of signature, and that in exchange, after that, the U.S. would reduce the number of troops in the country. There are currently between 12 and 13,000 U.S. forces in Afghanistan. The number fluctuates depending on units coming in and units going out, but that the number would likely go down if the Taliban can agree to this reduction of violence. Things progress. The U.S. would then go down probably to around 8,600 troops, which is a significant reduction, but not a complete withdrawal, enough to show goodwill from both sides, and that at that stage you would have negotiations going on directly between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan. So a framework is emerging. It is what they call conditions-based. A lot of things could go wrong. You could have the Taliban not able to control its forces. You could have the U.S. decide it's not going to pull back as many troops. A lot of things could upset this process. But for the first time after America's longest war, we may be looking at a kind of exit strategy, and it seems to be taking shape.
Richard Engel in Munich for us. Thank you for that. Today in China, add yet another city to the growing list of those announcing wartime measures in response to the coronavirus, as officials admit a crisis on the front lines among health workers. Today, the Vice Minister of Health confirmed more than 1,700 health workers have been infected in China. 6 have died so far. Meanwhile, in Japan, high-risk passengers have finally begun to leave the cruise ship Diamond Princess, where at least 32 Americans have been diagnosed. Those on board have been quarantined offshore since February 3rd. Republican Congressman Phil Rowe of Tennessee is lobbying the Trump administration to evacuate the American citizens on board back to the U.S. for testing. NBC's Molly Hunter has been talking to some of the passengers this week.
So you've had one test now?
I've had one test, and they said if you don't hear from us, it's good news. And I haven't heard anything.
I'm telling you, we're healthy.
People are also in quarantine here in the U.S. Americans who were evacuated from China and brought to U.S. military bases. Joining me now is Tyler Shepard, who is in quarantine at Camp Ashland in Nebraska with his wife, Young Mung, and their 1-year-old son, Neil. It's so good to see all of you. First of all, Neil could not be any cuter. So thank you for allowing him to be on television. Gives us a little smile. I think it's day 8 for you, Tyler, right? How are you guys holding up?
We're doing very good. Yeah, every day that passes, it gets faster. So when we first got in the plane, it was a little bit slow because we had to go on the flight that was 12 hours, and make stops throughout the United States. But now we get to relax, and it's more pleasant as the days go by.
Yeah, tell us what it's like. How is your day to day? Where are you? Are you kept apart from other people? Can you go outside freely? What's it like for you?
So we can go outside freely as long as we usually stay like 6 feet apart from each other. And we also have a town hall at 1:30. So we can get news if there's anything that we should know. And we usually stay in our quarters and we watch TV or we use our phone and keep updated on the situation.
Are you nervous at all about exposure?
When we first were coming from China, we were a little bit nervous, but as we go into day 8, we get less and less nervous each day.
So tell us, back up a little bit. How did you and your family end up where you are?
So we were in Suizhou. Sorry, my baby is. So we're in Suizhou, which is about 150 miles from Wuhan, and the U.S. Embassy had contacted me and said that they were able to issue my wife an emergency visa to come to the United States, because they had called me a few days before that and told me that they were unable to get my wife to the U.S. So I think that the United States saw that the escalation of the virus, so they helped me and my family come to the United States. So we had to go from Suizhou to Wuhan, and we had to pass 3, 4, 5 checkpoints. So we had our temperature check at each one. And then we finally arrived at the airport, where we had to go through immigration and communicate with the local government to be able to have all the necessary paperwork to be able to leave the country on the evacuation flight to the United States.
Well, it is certainly wonderful to see you and your beautiful family together and looking healthy, and we wish you all the best. Tyler, young Mung, and of course, little Neil, thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you so much.